Hey everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day, and we're here in Newtown, Connecticut at one of the largest library sales of the summer. Cathy, if you pan around, you'll show the entrance to the sale, the parking lot, the area where the Boy Scouts are cooking, and people leaving the sale with hundreds and hundreds of books. We're here on day 2 of the sale, and there were already still like 500 people inside buying books. It was really amazing. We were here yesterday and had a wonderful time, and I wanted to share 2 of the finds that we found that were the most interesting. Sound good?
Yes.
Let's get right to our box. Today, we're going to do a special Sherlock Holmes edition of Buy Day, because one of the things I try to do whenever we go to a library sale is identify the most interesting donations and where they may have come from. So there might be an English professor at certain sales and we'll concentrate on English books, or there might be a home decorator and we'll look at interior design books. But at this sale, there was a tremendous number of books on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and what they call Holmesiana, or all things having to do with Sherlock Holmes. And we found some really interesting books, didn't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were fascinating. They were all throughout the literature and the classic section. But back in the rare book barn, we found some original editions of the Strand Magazine with articles by Arthur Conan Doyle on Sherlock Holmes. And one thing you should know about the Strand is this was really one of the first monthly magazines that was designed for popular consumption in the 1890s in England. And it was designed predominantly to be read on trains. And they were trying to come up with stories that were of the right size so that people could read them, you know, sort of from in one stop. And Doyle hired a literary agent, and he was trying to come up with books that would make him more successful. He'd already written a couple Sherlock Holmes novels, but neither of them did well. And so what he did was he created bite-sized Sherlock Holmes tales that could be read on the train in one sitting. And he wrote a ton of them for the Strand Magazine, several dozen, and they were immediately huge hits. And so you couldn't find a railroad car or a railroad station in England where people weren't reading the Strand. This is a picture of what the magazine would look like when you'd buy it in the stalls. But with most 19th century magazines, people had them bound after the fact. So not only did they have individual volumes with all the great ads, this is one circa 1910, and this is actually a true crime story by Arthur Conan Doyle. But the Sherlock Holmes ones were bound, and we were able to buy an entire 6-month volume of the Strand Magazine filled with multiple adventures of the great Sherlock Holmes. So this is volume 6 from 1893. And what's exciting about this volume is that this is the volume in which Arthur Conan Doyle kills Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, no.
Each month there was a new adventure story, and then suddenly they got to December, you got on the train, and what did you get? You got the final adventure. Adventure number 24, The Final Problem. And this is the story in which Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote in his diary, "I have killed Holmes." Well, he didn't stay dead, as you know, if you're a watcher of Buy Day, but he almost did. And this is the great fall scene where Holmes is wrestling with Moriarty. One of the neat things about these Strand Magazine articles, Cathy, is that they were all illustrated by this gentleman named Sidney Paget, and he did these great engravings of Holmes. And as you can see from the final tale, they weren't that long. They were about the length of a trail ride. And this is a time when literacy is growing in England, and more people could read a story. And this is what made Sherlock Holmes the great success. That's it. We're done. I shall ever regard as the best and the wisest man whom I have ever known, says Watson. So the Strand Magazine and Holmesiana were some of the most interesting things at the sale. But that wasn't all that we found. We also found an American equivalent magazine from the same period. But before I show you that, I can't resist, because we also found the other side of Doyle. Now, so far on Buy Day, you've seen Doyle on spiritualism, you've seen Doyle on spirit photography, but you haven't yet seen Doyle on fairies. And they did have this wonderful book on the coming of the fairies. Now, are you familiar with this story? There were 2 teenage girls in Victorian England who basically claimed to have seen fairies, and they took some photos of these fairies. Let me get you a picture, and basically Doyle was convinced that they were real. So this is, I think, one of the photos, and this is Frances with the fairies. It's actually Edwardian England. It's 1917. But Doyle publishes this book right after seeing the photos, and it's a huge justification of why the photos are real. Of course, the photos aren't real, but you know, one of the things that's really interesting is the two girls live until the 1980s, and they don't confess that they've made up the fairies until 1983. And what they did was they made cardboard cutouts of fairies that they saw in other publications, and then they had them dangling with strings, which you can't see in the photographs, which is really cool. Doyle not only thought it was real, but he also goes to great pains in his preface here to explain that you know, even if you doubt that the fairies are real, please don't doubt spiritualism and all of his other books, because you know, this is all stuff that he believes. This is a great book on the coming of the fairies. I promised you another American magazine. So while the British audience was on the train watching and reading about Sherlock Holmes, in America you have the first tabloid magazine. And this is pretty neat too. We were able to find a purchase copy of this. This is something that was published by the National Police Gazette. And the National Police Gazette in New York was considered the first tabloid. And it published also sort of bite-sized stories and magazines and things that you could read on the train in America. But they were mostly about true crime and vaudeville. And they were known for skirting obscenity laws, Cathy, because the line engravings were not, I would say, proper, but they didn't quite cross the line. So they weren't banned. But you had a whole variety of interesting vaudevillian New York characters that are in these stories, and you could read about clubs and drinking in this sort of seedy underside of New York. I like the fact that this guy, Samuel McKeever, is called the American Charles Dickens. All right, we had one other really interesting book, and it's hot. It's July. It's the middle of summer, and I thought this cookbook was really, really interesting. This came from the back area behind us. It wasn't very expensive. It looks like it's sort of been through the wars a little bit, but it is a cookbook on the art of boiling sugar. And inside it are a series of recipes for all sorts of things. Rock candy, all the old-fashioned candy that you can still get today, horehound drops and lemon drops and funny, interesting things. One of the recipes, which is in here, is for cough drops. And it is at about this time that two gentlemen, the Smith brothers, begin marketing their cough lozenges. You remember those Smith brothers? We used to buy them when we were younger, but you can still get them today in the pack. Two very bearded 19th century Americans selling cough drops. Would you like to guess what the secret ingredient that made the cough lozenges so good was?
Sugar.
Well, if you had to add to the sugar?
What's that?
It would be morphine.
Oh no!
Yeah, so you just add a little morphine into
dear.
your lozenge. Well, no, but that's the way to do it. Okay, but what's really interesting about this cookbook is that we all know Philadelphia is known as the home of water ices. And I think people know Rita's, they know about Italian ices and various types of things, but water ice in Philadelphia is a thing. And as far as I can tell, and I didn't know it before looking at this book, this is the first book published in Philadelphia to popularize the concept of water ices. So if you look into the history of water ices, most people believe they were brought by Italian immigrants in the 1920s. And yes, they were sold by Italian immigrants in the 1920s, but they were actually manufactured even earlier in the 19th century in Philadelphia. And I just wanted to show it to you because it's really cool. It's a part of Philadelphia. Right after the ice cream, you get to water ices. And there's recipes for lemon water ice in Philly, as well as orange, strawberry, raspberry, currants, or pineapple.
Yum.
So a nice refreshing thing. I think we should go get one of those right after this. All right, we're going to end with a funny book. Are you ready?
Yes.
We found this in the craft section. Craft sections don't normally disappoint. And it's Ductogami, the art of the tape.
That's
all
fabulous.
Things that you can build with duct tape. I like the beginning because it shows you all these different things that you can do, from a duct tape wallet to a duct tape apron. And it even gives you a list of the top 10 things you can do with your leftover pieces of duct tape after you've made your project. Would you like to see if you can guess any one of the top 10 things you can do with leftover duct tape?
Play ball.
Well, no. But one thing you can do is you can remove lint from your clothing. That's right. Inexpensive lint removal from Ductogami, our funny book of the week. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you'll watch By Day Friday next week and every Friday at noon for more adventures in the world of books.